Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the main event. In the corner to my right, weighing in at 135 pounds, founder of Microsoft, winner of the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and the richest man in the world from 1995 to 2010, we have the tech tyrant, Bill Gates! And to my left, two guys who saw each other's dicks and decided to make a podcast about it, RadBill and MoneyMic! Let's get ready for another episode of Profiteers versus the People!
So, here's the thing about researching Bill Gates. You either get a bunch of sources just swooning all over the guy, or you get a bunch of stupid, like harebrained, right-wing bullshit conspiracy theories.
Dude, Snopes is working fucking overtime on this guy.
Yes.
If you look
Jesus
up
Christ.
Bill Gates on Snopes, here are some very legitimate questions that they are having to debunk for just the sake of not spreading disinformation. Top 3 for me.
Mm-hmm.
Is Bill Gates funding efforts to block the sun?
Wait, shit, I think I heard about this in an episode of The Simpsons. Was that Bill Gates? Was
Right.
that supposed to be Bill Gates?
Did Bill Gates say hung election and civil war are coming?
So, like, this one... All right, read the next one. I'm getting ahead of myself.
Did Bill Gates admit vaccinations are designed so governments can depopulate the world?
So, I'm trying to figure out what they think Bill Gates is.
Dude, the thing about the Bill Gates conspiracy theories is they give the dude way too much fucking credit.
Yeah. There's definitely some anti-Semitism in there. Like, there's some sort of Jewish conspiracy floating around that. No doubt in my mind.
I don't know if we've talked about it on this podcast, but if you get deep enough in most of these conspiracy theories, the they, I'm doing air quotes, the they that they're referring to, fucking 9 times out of 10 is Jewish people. At the heart of most conspiracy theories is just rampant fucking anti-Semitism.
The shit is lousy with it. It's fucking everywhere. We had to sift through just pages and pages of this insane shit.
I lost fucking brain cells. But we say all that to say, we do not think that Bill Gates is a lizard person. We don't think he's part of the Illuminati. But we're going to do our darndest to paint an objective picture of who he is, what his real motivations are, and some of the downright sinister shit this guy has gotten into.
Yeah, he's not a lizard, but he's gotten into some eerie shit.
Yeah, and the truth is often far more boring than the conspiracy theories, but it doesn't make it any less, okay, it is less concerning than him being a lizard person, but it is still concerning.
Marginally. I mean, here's the thing, is like, the funniest thing about the lizard person thing is, like, if it turned out he was a lizard person, I think everyone would go, whoa, holy shit. We still better address some of the more benign things he's doing, though, because...
Yeah, like, his biology doesn't really have a bearing on just some of the shit that we found in this guy.
Yeah, Barney is a lizard, and Barney fucking loves everyone. I don't think Barney's ever done a bad thing in his entire fucking life.
Dude, calling Barney a dinosaur is completely acceptable. Calling him a lizard for some reason makes me very uneasy, and even though the two things are the same, I am uncomfortable with that observation. But anyway, so... we say all that to say, if for whatever reason we accidentally used a source that should have been on InfoWars, fucking call us on it.
Call us out.
So, with all that being said, let's dive in.
Let's kick it off. So, who is Bill Gates?
So, William Henry Gates III, or Trey, as he was known in childhood, is the second of 3 children born to William H. Gates and Mary Maxwell Gates.
Yeah. Dude, the Gates at the end of Mary Maxwell just, like, fucks up the phonetics of that name so much. Mary Maxwell is fucking killer. That's such a cool name.
It's a fucking first female president of the United States name. Like,
Yeah.
I would vote for Mary Maxwell. Would I vote for Mary Maxwell Gates? She sounds like somebody who would assassinate a president.
She sounds like she could be a lizard, actually. In many
Oh
ways.
no! Stop!
I've heard
stop.
some things
we said
about
we
this.
wouldn't do
We
this.
said we wouldn't do this. I'm sorry. I blew it. Right away, I blew it. It's funny to me imagining him going around being called Trey. He could have also been called like Trip or any one of those the third names.
Yeah.
He could have been called Trippy.
Could have been Trippy Gates.
Trippy Gates, baby. I do dubstep and, I like live in the garage to like show off my independence and sleep on a futon.
I live in the garage to show up my independence. What a fucking line. But yeah, so let's pause here and talk a little bit about the dynasty that Bill Gates was born into. So Dad, William Henry Gates II, was a successful lawyer. And by successful lawyer, we mean a partner at a prominent law firm. And Mom, Mary Maxwell, served on the board of First Interstate Bank System and the United Way of America. Mary would go on to serve on the board of IBM as well. That is a very important detail. So Josh, write that down. Mom serves on the board of IBM. And Bill's maternal grandfather, J.W. Maxwell, was a national bank president.
Mike, I think we're both on the same page here, that he's a lot like some of the other folks we've covered and came from pretty humble beginnings.
Exactly. He really pulled himself up by his bootstraps.
He bootstrapped it, man. Yeah, humble beginnings.
He was born into, if not egregious wealth, significant wealth. He grew up in a very exclusive neighborhood called Laurelhurst in Seattle. So these are not humble beginnings by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, he grew up in a flashy house. The Gates dynasty didn't start with Microsoft, all in all. So why don't we go ahead and jump forward to his school days? Trippy Gates is 13, and he's at Lakeside, a fancy pants private school. This is where he wrote his first line of code, actually.
In 8th grade, his mother was part of something called a Mother's Club, which we don't know what that is.
We don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just never existed, like in my lifetime, or if it's a West Coast thing, or...
I'm just scared to Google Mother's Club because I know that I'll just get just mounds and mounds of MILF porn.
Hey, that's actually some pretty primo MILF porn to have under Mother's Club. It's fucking great.
But so the Mother's Club do something called a rummage sale. Again, don't know what that is.
No idea what that shit is. Yeah.
And they use the proceeds to buy Trey, or Bill Gates, and his buddy Paul Allen a teletype Model 33 ASR terminal and a block of computer time on a General Electric computer for students. So this Mother's Club spends all their money so that Bill, Paul Allen, their friends Rick Weiland and Kent Evans could use computers. So the story here is Bill is born into wealth, and he has this interest in code at a very young age, and someone buys him a computer in 1968.
Yeah, it falls into his lap. Yeah, just bing, bang, boom, there's a computer. And they do all this squirrely, like, nerd stuff where they, like, get into hijinks and get themselves more time on the computers. Keep in mind, this is all happening at a school called Lakeside High School, which is the most movie name for a high school in fucking history.
I feel like Lakeside is like the next Riverdale offshoot. Riverdale.
Yep, I could see it.
Lakeside.
I could see all of the 80s, 90s high school movies being filmed all at once on Lakeside's campus. Like, he and all his buddies are sneaking into the server room and getting themselves more time. And, we're peeping on girls, which at the time was cool, but now is super unacceptable. And then on the other side of campus, a bunch of the football guys are accidentally killing a cheerleader. And they're like, I can't tell anyone about this.
But anyway, like RadBill said, they are manipulating the system to get more computer time at this shared computer. And instead of getting into trouble for it, the school offers them a job. So a couple years later, Bill Gates and Ken Evans are hired by the school in their junior year to automate the class scheduling program. Unfortunately, Evans dies in a mountain biking accident, which is super tragic. We don't want to fucking gloss over that. And Paul Allen helps Gates finish the software. And this is important that him and Paul Allen, through tragic circumstance, become partners in this shit.
Yes. And this leads us into, he gets into Harvard, no surprise there, but this partnership will eventually become trafo data, which made traffic counters. It's pretty sweet.
This is where the transition into tech really begins. In January of 1975, Gates reads about a computer called an Altair 8800, and he reaches out to a company called Micro Instrumentation and Telemetry Systems, which is the maker of the computer, to see if they would be interested in something called a basic interpreter, which is a program Gates and Paul Allen had never even considered making up to this point. MITS was all hot for this idea. So in a few weeks, Paul and Bill make an emulator for the Altair so they don't have to buy one, and they create this basic interpreter.
Yes.
And they have a meeting with MITS. It was a success, and Paul Allen begins to work at MITS. And then, in November of 1975, Bill Gates takes the famous leave of absence from Harvard to join him.
A leave of absence. A leave of absence. He can come back. He's not walking away. We made a joke earlier about him calling himself Trippy. Him dropping out would be some trippy ass shit. It's like his parents were super fucking supportive and got him all the computer stuff. Dropping out of Harvard is something that you do if your dad's like, you have to be a lawyer. Go to law school at Harvard. And you're like, fuck you, Dad. I want to be a fucking DJ and, live out my dream. And then you eventually become a bus driver. That's how that fucking goes. We're not even shitting on him for this one. If you're dropping out of Harvard, you're out of your mind.
Exactly. If this didn't work, he's back at Harvard, becoming a partner at his dad's law firm. He didn't have much to lose other than a couple of years of time.
Yeah.
As soon as Bill takes this leave of absence, Paul Allen brands their company Micro Computer Software, or Micro-Soft for short.
Yes, and in November 26, 1976, Microsoft, without the hyphen, is registered in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
A few months after taking leave, Bill finds out that a version of Microsoft's Altair Basic Interpreter has been leaked and is being used by hobbyists. And
yes.
Bill is fucking pissed. It basically writes this open letter to the hobbyist community, effectively saying,
if you can just steal my shit, where's my motivation to create this shit? I should be able to demand payment for my shit. He sounds like Kermit the Frog. That's what we're getting at.
Oh God, it's so fucking perfect. But this was not a popular sentiment in a community of people who at this point were innovating for the love of innovation. And we will see this over and over again. Bill doesn't do shit for free.
Yeah, Bill expects payment for the shit that he does.
Absolutely. And this is where we see our first glimpse of who Bill Gates is as a leader and as a figure in this company that is brand new in a brand new industry.
Yes, everyone loves him. He comes in the first day and is like, call me Trippy. And everyone's like, yay, we love Trippy.
That's not what happens at all.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
In his book, Paul Allen shits all over the person that Bill Gates was at this time.
Yes.
He describes him as a slave driver. He claims that Bill once worked an employee 81 hours and 4 days and laughed in their fucking face when the employee requested a day off afterwards. Apparently, when they landed one of their first big contracts and had to figure out ownership of this new company, Bill demanded a 64-36 split, which Paul Allen describes as being a, just whatever I can get type of mentality. Again, when Bill does shit, he's gonna get paid for it. And he's gonna make
this
more
makes
than you.
Trippy a less funny nickname, actually.
Yeah.
Say what you will about Trippy, but he wouldn't do that.
Dude, Trey Gates would not have done this. Bill, on the other hand, is a goddamn monster. So then in 1981, Paul Allen is diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease. And this is obviously a tragic diagnosis. The guy is not old. But he catches Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer discussing how they might issue options to the other shareholders as a way to dilute Paul Allen's shares because Paul might not be able to put in the same amount of work.
Yeah, actually, there was a third guy on our podcast, and we wound up having to do this same thing. It was it was Paul Allen. Can you believe that? Paul Allen was on this podcast, and we were like, he's just too sick. He's not
Dude.
carrying his weight on the research.
Yeah.
Better kick his ass to the curb.
The thing is, our podcast is making so much money.
Yeah, we made the right decision. He's dead now, so accomplished.
So when this happens, Paul basically bursts in the room and is like, "You fucking monsters!"
Yeah.
And Bill and Steve are like, "Oh no, we were just like kissing in here."
Yeah, we were just making out. Don't worry about that. We were talking dirty to each other. It's nothing.
So then Bill later offers to buy Paul shares for $5 a share, and Paul refuses. Fortunately, for Paul, his net worth at the time of his death was around $20 billion. Had Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer made their plot a reality, that figure would likely be a lot fucking lower.
Mm-hmm.
So bottom line, dude, this guy gets paid for the shit he does, and if he can take something from somebody else, he fucking will.
Brilliant segue to our next section on our hero, Gary Kildall.
Yes. So in 1979, Microsoft moves from Albuquerque, where they initially registered, to Bellevue, Washington. And in Bellevue, Gary Kildall's company, Digital Research, is right down the road.
Yep.
And at this point, this company is the industry standard for operating systems.
Yep. Gary Kildall, who kind of considers himself a bit of a greaser. He's also a 70s computer guy. So, like, the Paul Allen that busted into the room and was like, "How dare you?" And Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer are both like, "You're right, we're sorry. We hate conflict." Like, that similar group. This guy's like, "Yeah, I'm a greaser." But he's just like a cute little nerd. Whatever. He's working out of his house. His wife's running the show.
Yeah. And they're all just kind of trying to find the footing of their industry in the late 70s, early 80s.
Oh, yeah.
At this point, IBM, we've heard this name before, is working on a competitor to the Apple II and is using off-the-shelf components instead of making chips in-house.
Yep, and this is important. They're doing this because they want a quick turnaround. The Apple II is already out. They need to haul ass. So for our one lovely listener in the Philippines, you're going to want to write this one down. Also, thanks for listening.
Bill Gates' mother, who, as we might remember, is on the board of IBM, points the CEO in the direction of her son's budding company, Microsoft.
Yes.
So IBM approaches Bill Gates and basically says, "Hey, so can you write the basic interpreter for this new system?
Mm-hmm.
Also, can you write an operating system?" And Bill Gates goes, "I'm sorry, we don't really have one right now.
We've got all the Altair Basic you could ever need, but we don't have any operating system."
Yes. Fuck, dude, it gets me every time. Still gets me. So at this point, Bill says, "Hey, I don't have it, but my buddy down the road, Gary Kildall, he's the subject matter expert in operating systems."
Yeah, you're going to love him. He's kind of a badass, like greaser type. Super cool.
So Bill calls Gary, and he mentions that some important people are coming Gary's way, but due to an NDA, he can't be very specific. So IBM's people knock on the door. Gary wasn't in. He was out flying his little plane around on business, but his wife, who is the head of operations, was home, and she ends up speaking with these IBM representatives, which is typical. She's the fucking head of operations.
Yeah.
This is what she deals with.
Yes, there's a ton of shit online where they try and paint this tragic story where it's like, yeah, Gary had all this promise and he was out in the clouds and IBM came a knocking and the only person they got to talk to was his inept little wife. But she did this all the time. She was the contract person. This was protocol.
Exactly. And like just the inherent sexism behind those stories is gross.
Yeah, Gary, a man, was out doing big boy business on his airplane.
Him and his penis.
Yeah, and the other IBM guys come out with their penises and knock on the door. And oh no, Gary's lowly wife is there to try and grapple with all this big dick business.
This big dick business. But anyway, so Gary's wife answers the door, but she plays hardball with IBM's NDA because it was a creepy ass document.
Yeah, this shit was like CIA level stuff. It was like, we weren't here. We're not IBM. It probably didn't say that. It probably said, like, when we tell you who we are, you can't tell anybody else.
Yeah, so bottom line, Gary's wife just isn't comfortable with this document and kicks him out of the house. So IBM gets back to Bill Gates' mom, who gets back to Bill Gates. Maybe that's how it worked. Maybe it wasn't. But bottom line, IBM basically says, hey, so we tried to reach out to Gary. That didn't work out. Is there anybody else you know? And old Billy Boy said, you know, I think I can make an operating system.
If there are no more takers, I can do it. Ha 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 ha.
Even though Microsoft did not have an operating system at this point. So, old Billy Boy Gates and Paul Allen get to work. Cue the 80s nerd montage. There were soldering irons. There was synth-driven pop in the background. There was tons of coffee.
There was tons of sunglasses indoors. That was a staple, right? That was a staple, right?
People were saying things like, I'm in.
Yes.
But after all of this, they couldn't do it. So, they
didn't know what an operating system was. This is hard shit.
This isn't how fucking real life works. So, they call a small company in the area called the Seattle Computer Products Company, and they buy an operating system for $75.
Pretty much. Yeah, that company was just hobbyists.
Yeah.
Here we are again. And they're like, hey, can we just fucking buy this shit off you? We made a joke about a montage earlier. We don't even know if they tried to make an operating system. They were just like, here's fucking $75K. Can we just buy yours? Yeah. And basically, it fucking wound up being Gary Kildall's system.
Yes. So they buy this operating system and they call it the Quick and Dirty Operating System, or QDOS. And again, the code was a complete ripoff of the code used for CDM, which is Gary Kildall's code. QDOS became MS-DOS, and that would be packaged with every IBM PC. And they later changed the meaning of Microsoft Dirty Operating System to Microsoft Disk Operating System.
Much more sterile and businessy. Very good.
So the first IBM PC is released, and it fucking crushes it. IBM overtakes Apple as the largest PC manufacturer, and this normalizes PCs for business folks.
Yep. PC is in the office, baby.
So at this point, Microsoft sells MS-DOS to IBM for this round of PCs for $50,000. And if you notice, Bill Gates bought this for $75,000. So he took a $25K loss on this thing. But there was no exclusivity agreement between Microsoft and IBM. So Microsoft didn't just sell their operating system to IBM. They sold it to every fucking IBM competitor as well. And this right here is the licensing deal that makes Bill Gates a fucking billionaire.
Here's the thing with all of this magnificent success is that Gary has a knack for spotting his own fucking code in other people's computers. He's fucking great at that shit.
Yeah, so as a result, Gary threatens to sue IBM. And then, as we understand it, IBM says, fine, you got us. We can sell computers with CDM as well, and we'll charge the customer an extra $200. However, that extra $200 for essentially the same operating system with a different name deterred pretty much all buyers.
Yep, this devastated Gary. And by the end of his life, he was left with a paltry 8 or 9 figure fortune, relegated to a few dozen sports cars, 1 Learjet, 1 boat, a single lakefront home in Austin, Texas, and only 1 mansion in Pebble Beach with panoramic views.
Only one.
He wouldn't even get to be the keynote speaker at his own alma mater.
Quite a second place trophy there, Gary.
Pretty much the rule of thumb was, it's an algorithm. Computer word. If you fucked around with computers, you got to be a billionaire after the 70s. It was amazing.
That was it. That was it. So then the first retail version of MS-DOS launches on November 20th, 1985. It's modified from its original form and called Microsoft Windows. And this is Microsoft's huge ass break. This is where Bill goes from Bill Gates to billionaire Gates. And he has no intention of letting the momentum up anytime soon. So then, in 1988, Bill Gates builds the most hilarious house ever fucking constructed. Some features of this house, just to kind of give you an idea of who Bill Gates is and what he does with his money. It's 66,000 square feet. It has an artificial stream filled with salmon and cutthroat trout, 7 kitchens, 7 bedrooms, 24 bathrooms, a 2,100 square foot library with a reading dome complete with a fucking Great Gatsby quote, a large aquarium in the living room, and, dude, this one is what fucking gets me. A trampoline complex with 20-foot ceilings.
Mm-hmm. Like Bill Gates could double jump himself that high. Give me a fucking break.
This man was in his goddamn 30s and was like, you know what I need? I need a fucking trampoline room.
I need a trampoline room to blow off steam.
It's like if you gave $50 million to a Coke dealer and Tom Hanks and Big and had them compromise on the fucking house that they were going to build.
Discussions around this house, I think, make a strong case for what, like, melts billionaire brains. So he had quite the art collection. But what he decided is, instead of just putting my paintings on the wall, I want to put a screen on the wall so that people can tailor the art to their own mood. And if you're like us, you're hearing this and something in the back of your mind is going, that's kind of stupid. Because half of the fun of having a really fancy art collection is standing in front of the real painting and being like, yeah, that one right there is the real goddamn thing. But he, like, goes on Letterman or some shit at one point in the 90s. And, like, David Letterman's asking about his house, and he goes into the painting thing. He's like, yeah, well, we want the experience to be tailored to each guest. So instead of putting in paintings in each room, we put in little TVs that display paintings. And if you don't want to look at the painting that's being shown, you can just change the channel. And David Letterman, like, looks back to his audience like, wow. And the audience just goes fucking crazy.
Dude.
Yeah, this is like the pinnacle of just patronizing people with way too much money. All he had to talk about on that fucking thing was his house.
Yeah, seriously. So while we're talking about the rise of this tech superstar, we need to talk about some of the recognition that all of this momentum is garnering him at this time, as well as his relationship with that recognition. Bill Gates fucking loves awards. Even though he gets them all the time, it's evident that he very actively seeks those awards out.
He can't stop with awards. He's all about them.
Dude, like, his entire guest house must just be trophies that he doesn't even remember getting. But some examples here, he's elected as a member of the U.S. National Academy of Engineering. He's honored as the 20th Distinguished Fellow of the British Computer Society. He's named CEO of the Year for Chief Executive Officers Magazine in 1994. The guy loves awards, and he loves them so much that he seeks them out deliberately. And that detail, keep it in mind, it's gonna become relevant later in our story.
It becomes a big part of the story very, very suddenly.
Yes, but behind the scenes, Microsoft was apparently just a goddamn shit show in the 1990s. A former employee describes a review meeting with Bill Gates, and he explained that there is a fuck counter. And the fuck counter was a person, and that person's job was to count the number of times that Bill Gates said, fuck, and the lower the number, the better.
Do you know how cool it would be to be the fuck counter?
Oh,
I'm
dude.
sorry. So many cool fucking movie lines.
I guess he was out of fucks to give. CSI Miami music. The point here was that Bill Gates would just drill people and make sure they knew their shit. And at the time of all of this happening, Bill Gates is 36. He's a 36-year-old man with a fucking trampoline house. Keep in mind, he has no kids at this time. The trampoline house is his.
There's no snot on this trampoline room at all.
Okay, there might be some snot. It is Bill Gates. But then the government comes a-knocking. The FTC begins an inquiry into Microsoft, and this was in 1992. All of this stemmed from the fact that within the Microsoft operating system, it was really hard to uninstall Microsoft product, Internet Explorer, and really fucking hard to install a competitor product like Java or Netscape.
And the way that they tied Internet Explorer to the OS felt really goddamn anti-competitive. The commission that was investigating them wind up at a stalemate 2-2, so it goes on to the DOJ. I still don't know how to uninstall Internet Explorer.
I've never tried.
I haven't either.
I mean, I don't use it. I'm not like 45, but I don't know how to get rid of it.
All of my PDFs open in whatever the new thing's called.
Edge.
Edge is open right now. I'm edging right now.
The only time I have ever used Internet Explorer is to download another browser.
Yeah, that's it. So next up is the DOJ, where Microsoft made their case that it's not tying or anti-competitive because Internet Explorer wasn't a product, it was a feature of the operating system. Here's the problem, though. At this time, Internet Explorer could be purchased separately if you wanted it for your Mac. And the price of Windows OS went up after Internet Explorer came out. So it had both an explicit and implicit cost. It could stand on its own, but it wasn't a product. That kind of makes you go, which a judge did in 1998. So Microsoft is brought into court again in D.C. for, among other things, requiring that if computer makers want to utilize Windows, they must also include Internet Explorer. Bill is first deposed, and let me fucking tell you, Bill Gates, the genius behind Microsoft, looks like a fucking moron in these deposition tapes. The interviews were just finding landmine after landmine while talking to him.
The interviewer would ask him something like, did your team require Intuit to give less favorable treatment to Netscape in exchange for a clickable icon on the Windows 98 home screen? And then Bill will pause and say something like,
did we literally say those exact words?
And then the interviewer will just look constipated and be like, no, dude, did you require Intuit in any sense of the word to give Netscape less favorable treatment?
Yeah, and Bill's like, what do you mean require?
And this just goes around in fucking circles. He was fucking pulling that depends what your definition of is.
Yes, he was.
It was so fucking stupid. And just like that didn't work for Bill Clinton, it did not work for Bill Gates. And then the interviewer reaches into their briefcase and pulls out an email.
Like, he pulls out the email and Bill Gates is like, oh shit, I forgot you could print those. God damn it. The email basically said, hey, how are we going to get Apple to crush this competitor of ours? They're hurting, and there's like an easy way to do it. And Bill's like, he freezes up, and now he's like flustered, and he's like rocking in his chair, and he's like, well, I don't remember sending that. And like eventually he's just relegated to this idea of like, I don't know what I meant by that though. What could I have meant? Like, you're right, Bill. Who's to say what you could have meant by how are we going to fuck these guys over?
Exactly, dude.
The guy's got a briefcase full of these fucking papers, and he keeps fucking pulling them out and showing Bill emails. And at the end of it, Bill's just resigned to rocking in his seat and just giving one-word answers. During the actual trial, these tapes are played, and the whole court is just fucking laughing at Bill Gates. Also, Microsoft submitted what sounds an awful lot like falsified evidence.
So basically, Microsoft was trying to make a case that if they removed Internet Explorer, it would slow down Windows. So Microsoft submitted a video of Microsoft employees removing Internet Explorer from a Windows computer, and it all of a sudden experiencing a drop in performance. But then experts observing the footage noticed that there was a spot where the icons in the desktop suddenly changed. And they were like, dude, this fucking footage has been doctored. It wasn't even doctored well. So then Microsoft's like, oh, fuck. So they submit another tape showing how easy it is to install Netscape on Windows. A few easy clicks, and boom, you have Netscape. There's a Netscape right there on the home screen. But when the government tried to do the exact same thing and made footage of their installation process, a huge part of it was not included in Microsoft's video, and Netscape couldn't even be put on the fucking home screen. So after all of this rigmarole, Microsoft finally gives up, and they say, hey, we falsified evidence, which, that sounds pretty fucking perjurous.
It sounds damning. Yeah, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know exactly what perjury is, but that gives me serious perjury vibe. These guys are just perjuring left and right.
Yeah, which is so gross.
Well, what's hilarious to me is, like, they made doctored videos of something that was so easily reproducible.
Yes!
Like, the fucking court was like, do we have one of those computer things in the late 90s? And they're like, yeah, we have at least one. RadBill doesn't know exactly how many computers they have, but surely there's one in the building.
Yeah, dude.
Jesus.
It's fucking
How could you be so stupid?
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Unsurprisingly, in July 2000, Microsoft loses the case and is ordered to split into two companies, one that makes operating systems and one that makes other software shit. They appeal the decision immediately and begin an astroturfing campaign. So for those who don't know what astroturfing is when a company creates a fake grassroots movement. So what Microsoft did is they reached out to regular people and asked them to send these letters that Microsoft had pre-written to their state attorneys general, asking them to drop the case against Microsoft. 2 of the letters were sent from people who were fucking dead, which, paired with some other flaws, led the movement to obviously fucking fail. But 11 months later, the courts overturned the previous ruling that Microsoft had to split up, citing conversations the presiding judge had with the media, which, bad move, judge, and the evident fact that the judge wasn't extremely fond of Bill Gates or the Microsoft team in general. The judge contested that any disdain he had for Bill or the company was the result of him presiding over that case. Like, I was there and they were just giant fucking shiesty assholes.
I didn't hate that guy, but then I fucking met him and that changed.
Even if I recused myself, the next judge would have had this same problem. Any judge would have hated these guys.
Yeah, when people falsify evidence, judges don't love that.
Yeah, judges are super, like, they're really kind of sticklers about that stuff, I've heard, actually.
Fake evidence is kind of a bummer. But anyway, so ultimately, through dastardly antics, Microsoft doesn't get split up, and Bill Gates continues to dominate the conversation. So this is where the power of Bill Gates leaves the private sector and starts to bleed in to the ultimate expression of wealth. And we saw this with Andrew Carnegie, and that is philanthropy.
Yeah, I would say, too, so much of this shit is self-preservation as well.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
yeah, it's self-preservation. Hey, I was a giant fucking asshole for the last 30 years. I can be nice sometimes, too. I'm a cool guy. Call me Trippy.
And we have to remember, Bill loves awards. And what's a great way to get awards? Start a philanthropic cause, which is exactly what he does. And he starts the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in 2000.
I want to reference Jason Henkel's book, The Divide, and how it discussed charitable work and his experience working for a non-government organization, or NGO. He was hired by World Vision to help analyze why their development efforts in Swaziland weren't getting the anticipated traction. And Jason found that they weren't getting any traction because, in essence, they were missing the point.
Yeah.
World Vision went about caring for dying AIDS patients, setting up income generation schemes for the unemployed, teaching new techniques to farmers, and paying for children's education. As helpful as these projects were, they weren't doing a thing to address the actual causes of these problems. Why were AIDS patients dying? Pharmaceutical companies refused to allow Swaziland to import generic versions of patented life-saving medicines, keeping prices way out of reach. What about the farmers? They were unable to make a living off of the land because of the subsidized foods flooding in from the US and from the EU and undercutting local agriculture. Why was the government unable to provide basic services? Because it was buried under a shitload of foreign debt and was being forced by Western banks to cut social spending in order to prioritize repayment. When Jason pointed these issues out, World Vision managers told him that the findings were too political. It wasn't World Vision's job to tackle pharma patents, international trade rules, or debt. He was told that if those issues were raised, World Vision would lose their funding. The global systems of patents, trade, and debt was what made plenty of World Vision's donors rich enough to donate in the first place. We got this quote from a fantastic video series on the We Charity from the YouTube channel We're in Hell. We Charity has been bickering at him throughout the release of the episodes and has spent some considerable effort trying to dissuade him from investigating their shit. Check it out, it's awesome. But anyways, the host goes on to say quite astutely, if we aren't able to address the root causes of the problems, we risk normalizing them.
Yes. So back to the foundation. Let's talk about where the foundation's leadership comes from.
The CEO, the COO, the director of HIV, the deputy director of regulatory affairs, vaccine development lead, the president of global health, the agriculture R&D team lead, head of agricultural development, and chief communications officer all hail from companies like Genentech, GlaxoSmithKline, Pfizer, Merck, Novartis, Monsanto, Union Carbide, and Unilever.
So a ton of fucking private interests.
That's where most of the corporate hierarchy at the foundation came from.
They are in bed with some of the most powerful corporations in the world.
Yes.
So that's who the foundation is and who runs the foundation. Now we're going to dig into some of the initiatives that the foundation is most famous for. A common theme here. They all look incredible from the outside looking in. But once we dig a little deeper, things are going to get questionable.
Really juicy.
For the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and by extension, for Bill Gates himself.
Let's do this, Money Mike. We've got two ventures that we've dug into. Why don't I cover Gavi, which is focused on vaccines? It's the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization. And why don't you cover AGRA afterwards?
Yep, absolutely. Sounds good.
All right, terrific. So, Gavi, as I mentioned, the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization is one of the foundation's first ventures. This was founded at the start of 2000. Let's see what it is, who's funding it, and what the stipulations of that funding look like. So, firstly, Bill Gates fucking loves vaccines. He's quoted as saying that they resemble the simple but highly effective solutions he always sought during his tenure at Microsoft. He thinks vaccines are neat. That's basically it. Yeah, he thinks they're super fucking cool. So this huge push for vaccines against shit like malaria ignores the fact that malaria's eradication in Europe was the result of environmental measures like drainage of swamps, improved sanitation, and large-scale economic development. Experts have raised this concern, saying that vaccine studies are the priority of wealthy donors, not of the recipient countries. All of the donor money coming in skews public health programs and effectively bypasses the public health systems. The foundation's considerable funding of the World Health Organization is tied to specific projects. Ordinarily, the way it would work if MoneyMic or RadBill donated any of their extremely meager profits, being $0 and whatever money MoneyMic or RadBill found that day, to the World Health Organization, it would go through the World Health Assembly, which would choose how to delegate that money to the areas that are in need, not with the foundation's money. That's tied to specific projects. They tell the World Health Organization how to spend it, and it constitutes a massive part of the WHO's annual budget. In some years, it's over 10% of the entire budget. They fund the World Health Organization more heavily than plenty of sovereign countries do. So, This forces the World Health Organization to change how it operates and has greatly hampered its policymaking power. During the Ebola outbreak of 2014, the Director General of the World Health Organization explained that the budget she was allotted was so heavily earmarked by donor interests that she couldn't put anything substantial towards building health systems and had to instead focus on what she was told to do by the donors. The foundation is one of the largest contributors to the World Health Organization. The runner-ups are fucking governments here, so we can assume that the foundation played a big role in perpetuating that part of that crisis. We can assume, allegedly.
Yeah. Allegedly.
So who's involved in Gavi? Well, Merck is on the board of the Global Fund, which is on the board of Gavi, and the Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers, which includes GlaxoSmithKline, Merck, Novartis, and Pfizer, among others, is on the board of Gavi just straight up. That federation is just right there on the fucking board. A big area of contention with this is the advanced market commitment offered by the foundation, which has largely been seen as a means to subsidize big pharma with aid money. Effectively, these groups donate to the Gates Foundation in exchange for price guarantees for the vaccines they develop. And let me tell you, Gavi has a reputation for greatly overpaying for vaccines. Yeah, the non-governmental organization MSF finds that intellectual property rights over vaccines held by this small group of pharmaceutical companies has caused prices to soar. My God, is this an old story? MSF states that the cost of fully vaccinating a child increased by a whopping 6,800% between 2006 and 2016, and they claim one of the main reasons for this is a handful of big pharma companies overcharging donors in developing countries for vaccines that already earn them a shitload. MSF called out specifically the pneumococcal vaccine, which is only produced by GlaxoSmithKline and Pfizer, who've made a fortune on this shit, to cut the price from $60 to around $5 to just help perpetuate this to save more lives in these developing nations. When MSF called on them to do so, Bill Gates stepped in and personally dismissed these calls by MSF, basically saying, if you can pay nothing for their shit, where's their motivation to create this shit? They should be able to demand high payment for their shit.
This motherfucker's back at it again.
It never stops.
He's fucking perpetuating opportunism on other companies in their conversations with nonprofits that are just trying to save lives. The stakes here could not be fucking higher.
Yeah, people are dying.
Someone's like, dude, if you slash the price of this vaccine to $5, less kids will die. And Bill Gates is like,
you've made a good point. Let's hear their side of the story.
yeah, dude, like, what the fuck?
How the fuck does this have two sides? How are we doing a pro and cons thing right now? You run a charity!
Yeah, allegedly! But from this story, we can draw a few conclusions. First, health crises are complex. And
Yes.
sometimes the answer isn't simply just vaccines or some other silver bullet. Now, here at Profiteers versus the People, we are decidedly pro-vax.
Get your
But-
fucking shots. Get your shots.
Yeah,
Just get the
yes.
shot.
Please don't think that we're perpetuating anti-vax sentiments. But experts and people who are analyzing these situations have identified the fact that you can't just throw in a product, which is what a vaccine is, to fix things like malaria. It's bigger than that. You know, the
Yep.
foundation could have just as easily put a huge dent in malaria cases if they just built up the infrastructure by draining swamps, building cities. But the fact of the matter is that wouldn't have the same ROI as peddling these vaccines at inflated prices.
Our source on this chunk calls this development-focused philanthropy.
And another conclusion is that the function of Gavi seems to be to create a market for a product and then fill it with that product that happens to be massively overpriced, made by companies who have members that are literally sitting on the board of the foundation. And here's the thing. When someone is a senior executive of a company, like, any of the names that we listed in the beginning of this section, a huge amount of their compensation is in vested stock. And that stock doesn't just go away when someone leaves that company. So a huge portion of these foundation executives' wealth is tied to the performance of the companies that they are deliberately creating markets for. So their personal wealth is tied to these projects. The conflict of interest here is fucking staggering.
Yeah. Hey, Gates Foundation Board, how's about instead of promoting fucking companies who have plenty of fucking advertising dollars, you go ahead and look at promoting a small-time podcast that's trying to fucking dig through the truth.
We are taking donations.
We are taking donations. We have an OnlyFans. We probably will eventually. Let's be real. This is going to end in RadBill and MoneyMic whoring each other out.
This ends in feed pics.
Oh, totally. Stop. Agra time.
So we are now going to talk about AGRA. So AGRA is the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa. Doesn't that just sound delicious?
It sounds heavenly.
I want to donate now. As of 2016, the foundation had spent $2 billion, mostly in South Asia and parts of Africa, on this AGRA project. And AGRA is the largest charitable force for agriculture in the world. Yep. So you might be asking, oh, that sounds great. How does AGRA help? Well, fellow listener, it promotes agriculture and farming practices through lobbying for the commercialization of seeds and encouraging chemical fertilizer use. Doesn't sound so great now, does it?
It doesn't sound as great when you say it like that, Money Mike. I'm feeling a little discouraged about this.
It's now sounding like a massive bummer. Guardian describes Sam Dryden, who's the head of agriculture for the foundation, as possibly the most powerful figure in the world of agriculture today. The BBC, however, says, nah, that's fucking Bill Gates. As of 2016, $420 million has been given to AGRA by the Gates Foundation.
420, baby.
Ayo, Chippy Gates. But the foundation through AGRA is one of the world's largest promoters of chemical fertilizers, despite the evidence that shows that chemical fertilizers have not only significant health risks for farmers and farm laborers, but they also increase soil erosion and can trap small-scale farms in absolutely inescapable debt. Yeah. So a $25 million grant from AGRA, which is one of their largest, was to help establish another acronym, AFAP, which is the African Fertilizer Agribusiness Partnership, whose goal is to double fertilizer use in Africa. And fun fact here, when AFAP was founded in 2012, the president of AGRA left to become the founding chair of AFAP. You just can't make this fucking shit up. The conflicts of interest are just disgusting.
He's like, I want a FAP. I want a FAP. I want a FAP. I feel good, and I want a FAP. I want to lead a FAP.
I just want a FAP, man. Like,
yeah, I want a FAP. I want to lead a FAP.
I'm just kind of stressed out right now.
Yeah, but, I'm worked up. This is a lot of work here. Bill Gates is a fucking slave driver.
Jesus Christ. But in 2014, AGRA notes that it is joining forces with the International Fertilizer Development Center, which represents the fertilizer industry. Is a foundation offshoot becoming ingrained with corporate interests again?
Dios mío.
Yes. That's actually exactly
yep.
what's
it's doing that thing. Yeah.
So the Fertilizer Development Center is going to support AFAP, hilarious, in its quest to develop a new fertilizer production, storage, and retail operations, with an additional focus on a shit ton of fertilizer to farmers in Ghana, Mozambique, and Tanzania. Our source claims that AGRA's agenda is, and I'm quoting here, the biggest threat to the movement in support of food sovereignty and agroecological farming methods in Africa. The paper argues that agroecological farming is the key to increasing yields and can often be more effective than industrial agriculture, which is what AGRA is trying to do.
Yes, AGRA loves the industrial shit.
Of course they do. They're a fucking corporation. So, more so, agroecological farming will be more profitable for small farmers and easier on the environment. Oliver DeSchutter added to this in 2011, saying, the question of empowerment and participation are key here. It is unrealistic to achieve sustainable progress in combating rural poverty simply through technology. The political economy of the food systems, the question of bargaining power, are in fact key ingredients, as important as seeds. how sustainable is the classic Green Revolution package of improved seeds, chemical fertilizers, and pesticides in a world that is running out of fossil energies and in which control over these inputs is in the hands of a very limited number of large corporations that are only accountable to their fucking shareholders?
Yeah, the whole shareholder system turns these organizations into sociopathic monsters.
Dude, seriously. So, in addition to promoting soil eroding chemical fertilizers, the other big focus of AGRA is seed policy. Dude, why isn't AFAP's goal seed policy? That'd be so much fun.
Why can't AFAPs just give us the seed?
Yeah, dude, just
I just want a FAP so I can get a seed.
I'm not funny. Give me an opportunity for a joke here. So what AGRA does is it lobbies for commercial seed systems. In order for commercial seed companies to invest in research and development, they, of course, need protections for intellectual property because we can't just do things because they're good.
Yeah.
Currently, 80% of Africa's seed supply comes from millions of small-scale farmers sharing and recycling seeds. And their focus of this lobby is a desire for seed laws that protect certified varieties of plants and give associated royalties. And they want to criminalize all non-certified seed. And these efforts have opened the door to the potential acquisition of every substantial seed enterprise on the continent, as well as seed production by large corporations.
Not cool, Trippy. Not cool.
Total bummer, man.
You're blowing it.
In addition, biopiracy is the appropriation, usually through patents, of rights over seeds and plants and basically just shit to develop medicines or foods without compensating the countries that these things came from. It's like fucking patent trolling, but for seeds.
That's it.
And in 2005, it was estimated by the African Union that Africa loses between $5.6 and $8 billion a year to biodiversity theft. However, more recently, this figure was estimated to be closer to $15 billion a year for Africa alone. And now, these are only estimates, but I assure you that these losses to the continent far outweigh whatever the Gates Foundation is doing on the continent. And also, only 4% of the $669 million that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has granted to non-government organizations have gone to non-government organizations based in Africa.
What's funny about this is he just dumped this massive amount of money on this country, and all of the experts in Africa are like, no, God, please, fuck no, get it out of here. We can't deal with any more fucking Gates money. Jesus Christ. Like, let's think for a second about these goddamn numbers. When I was researching for this, and when MoneyMic was researching for this, we both were blunted by the fucking numbers we're hearing. $700 million donated to one particular thing by one charitable organization is massively influential.
Oh my God,
this is huge money.
The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has as much influence in these things as sovereign nations.
Yeah, and according to the African Center for Biodiversity, counter to what AGRA claims, there's a lot of positive press for AGRA. Its lobbying efforts really are focused on the commercial production of seed.
And dude, we've seen this before. It's, there's a
shit.
problem. Let's solve it with a product.
Let's invent something we can sell.
In February 2012, the Gates Foundation announced a $200 million donation to the International Fund for Agricultural Development, which is IFAD. And he was invited to speak at IFAD's governing council on the same day, where he implored countries to bring agri-science and technology to poor farmers, which he says the real expertise lies with the private sector companies.
Yeah, so quick note on this shit, by the way. The Houdini tricks come out of the lack of visibility. When governments do initiatives, they're subject to scrutiny and regulation. The Gates Foundation isn't. The only court appearance they will have to make is to the court of public opinion. That is, unless they do a shitload of journalist suppression.
They wouldn't do journalist suppression.
No, the Gates Foundation. Oh my God. The foundation funds go to most of the big media folks. Guardian, ABC, plenty of this shit goes to CNN, all the ones that you can flip to on your fucking TV, as well as plenty of the channels in Africa. The Seattle Times notes that most of the news organizations that receive funding from the Gates Foundation almost never critique the foundation.
Yep.
Our source speculates that this is because none of these media groups want to lose their Gates funding, which is not fucking surprising.
Yeah, exactly.
We found one piece of information from this that was from The Guardian, and we wound up going with a different goddamn source. The foundation has invested millions in training programs for journalists and funds for research on the most effective ways to craft media messages. The foundation-backed organizations turn out media fact sheets and newspaper opinion pieces, while scientific journals get Gates money to publish research and articles. Your ass is on the line if you want to critique the Gates Foundation. Beyond that, the foundation backs a ton of non-government organizations which are fucking silent on the foundation. The exceptions to this rule: MSF, Global Health Watch, GRAIN, Friends of the Earth, and the African Center for Biodiversity. We've cited plenty of these organizations' critiques in this episode. None of these groups are receiving funding from the foundation.
It could be perceived that we're getting a little conspiratorial here, but we cannot ignore these facts.
We haven't accused anyone of being a lizard yet.
That's coming later. I'm just kidding.
Not yet. Although, no. The foundation is creating a narrative built around the idea that every problem has a solution that can be created and distributed. But this model demands that the poor are waiting to be handed the solution from donors. Rest assured, charity dollars as a solution to the issue that the global poor face today is a better solution than let them fucking die, but the handouts aren't being sought by these people. The global poor need rights and justice. This requires fundamental changes in how the West, quote unquote, operates. It requires preventing corporations from doing what they have spent the last century or two doing, and the Gates Foundation wants no part in that shit.
Yeah, if Bill Gates really wanted to affect change, a great place that he could start is the Democratic Republic of the Congo. For those who don't know, the DRC is a pretty huge bummer for its citizens right now. But instead of working to remedy these issues, in 2016, Microsoft was named among 5 other large tech companies in a lawsuit levied by the families of some of the child laborers who worked in a Congolese cobalt mine. Due to the fact that Microsoft purchased cobalt from these mines to create their products, the plaintiffs claimed that these companies, quote, knowingly aided and abetted and subsequently benefited from forced labor practices in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The case describes these children sustaining a variety of injuries, including smashed limbs and broken spines, as well as being killed by collapsing tunnels or falling to their deaths in unprotected mine shafts. The judge dismissed this case due to the fact that, quote, the plaintiffs must have standing to bring their claims, but here they do not. The harm they allege is not traceable to any defendant. Additionally, they noted that the civil remedy portion of the act used to substantiate the lawsuit could not be applied outside of the United States. Let's just think about this for a second. If the case was outside of the court's jurisdiction, then why did they agree to hear it in the first place? I feel like that's a pretty easy thing to determine on the front end.
It's someone hand waving and going, Microsoft's the biggest company in the US.
Dude, no, it's fucking Bill Gates saying, well, Internet Explorer isn't a product. It's the same fucking thing. Just this time, kids' lives are on the line. Even though Microsoft is apparently innocent, they could still stop buying cobalt from these mines and stop perpetuating the problem. The issue here is that you can't develop and distribute a product like a computer that makes child labor go away.
Yeah, that's it. Keep in mind, if people are beaten into submission and then given an allowance, the real goal is to keep them docile.
Exactly. Fallacies like this just arise for a lot of the foundation's initiatives. The Gates Foundation is focused heavily on climate change, but it wants to address it by further developing systems that are already in place. They want to create zero-emission fuels and energy sources that are cheaper and easier to access, But the key to addressing climate change quickly is to change habits and change the systems that are already in place.
Yeah, here's the fucking thing. The fast solution to climate change is fucking rail. It's nuclear power. It's the things that governments do. And by the way, the profitable system for rail is sending cargo along rail, not sending people along it. Everything about what we're going to need to do on the climate preservation front runs counter to the profit motive. I love the idea of Climeworks, a carbon capture technology that the Gates Foundation is heavily invested in. But the problem with carbon capture is that these machines capture less carbon than they fucking create. That's been a problem across the board. It's not just with the ones that the Gates Foundation is funding. We have a long way to go before there's a net fucking positive here. Climeworks, trippy. It doesn't excuse your private jet.
Yeah, he cares until it affects him, which, maybe that's just the fucking human condition. So if everybody who's been listening has been like, well, Africa doesn't really affect me, that's no big deal. He's a piece of shit, but he's not a piece of shit to me. Well, this is how he was a piece of shit to you.
We all remember 2021 when vaccines actually started coming out and everyone was super excited. Was that 2020 or 2021, MoneyMic?
Dude, that 2 years or 3 years just is a fucking blur.
It's all a fucking blur, right? Anyways, a lab at Oxford developed one of the initial vaccines for COVID. And their thought was, we're going to make this thing open source. Or the most aggressive case here is that we're going to seek a small profit as we open this thing up to the masses and scale the goddamn vaccine and vaccination efforts. Weeks later, Oxford fucking backtracks at the behest of the Gates Foundation and a handful of others and licenses the vaccine exclusively to AstraZeneca. The deal carried no guarantee of low prices, and as a result, many African nations wound up paying twice what Western nations wound up paying. The deal also carried a less publicized potential for Oxford to eventually make fucking millions from this deal and win plenty of prestige.
And the cherry on top here is, do you know who funded all of the research for that vaccine?
Oh, get ready for this.
You did.
You did. It was fucking you, man. 97% of the funds for that research came from taxpayers. The thing about fucking vaccines is that if they are administered effectively, quickly, and across the fucking board, guess what happens to the disease, particularly with viruses? It goes away. Slow administration of a vaccine allows a virus to mutate and adapt.
How many fucking mutations have we seen in the past 12 months?
A good trivia question, MoneyMic. How many letters of the Greek alphabet can you list off?
Not enough.
I can list 3. Alpha, Beta, and Omicron, and I feel like those are not in the correct order.
This consortium grabbed the reins of the COVID-19 response. They set all these targets and missed every single one of them. There's a Politico article called How Bill Gates and Partners Use Their Clout to Control the Global Pandemic Response with Little Oversight. It's a great article. Read it. But there's a quote that really stuck out to me. And it's from Lawrence Gostin. He said, I think we should be deeply concerned. Putting it in a very crass way, money buys influence. And this is the worst kind of influence. Not just because it's money, although that's important, because money shouldn't dictate policy. Also, because it's preferential access behind closed doors. Gostin goes on to say that such power, even if propelled by good intentions and expertise, is anti-democratic because it's extraordinarily non-transparent and opaque and leaves behind ordinary people, communities, and civil society. Bottom line, they seize control of the process, they seize control of the product that you fucking paid for, and as a result, we are how many years into this thing? And we're all kind of nervous that one day we're going to look at our phones and it's going to say, new COVID-19 variant out, everybody died.
New COVID variant, it's basically AIDS.
New variant just dropped, and you will too.
Yep. Yeah. What a good title. Jesus, we should be journalists. Let's go ahead and run through the crutches here.
Yes.
We're at the end of the episode. Consumer harm. He had a fucking monopoly. Doesn't get more textbook consumer harm than that shit.
Let's keep it at monopoly so we don't sound like broken records, but yes, there was consumer harm. Check that fucking box.
It is a checked box. Rich parents? Yes, there were rich parents.
Mary Maxwell, baby!
Union suppression. This didn't fit neatly into the story, but ask the Teamsters union members at Republic Waste Management what they think of Bill Gates, who's the largest private shareholder of Republic. See what you hear. Tax evasion. Again, it didn't fit snugly into any part of the story. Gates says he should be paying more in taxes, even though he pays more than everyone else. He's quoted as saying he's paid $10 billion more than anyone else. The tax rate he pays tells a much fucking different story. 100% of Bill's income is taxed at a rate of 17.5%, which is less than I pay.
Yep.
Taxes on long-term gains have always been lower, but in 2003, the Bush administration extended the capital gains rate to most stock dividends. This was never a fucking thing before that. Bill Gates saves an average of $125 million each year as a result of this. Between 2013 and 2018, he benefited more than literally anybody else, period. A single worker owning $45,000 will pay 21% on average when factoring in Social Security and Medicare. Also, it's worth noting the amount that Microsoft has saved with offshore tax havens greatly eclipses the amount the Gates Foundation has given.
And while we're talking about tax havens, we have to remember the Gates Foundation is a tax haven.
So, child labor allegations.
Check.
We heard the story about the Congo. Check. MoneyMic is absolutely correct. So, some of the more astute listeners might be hearing this and going, hey, RadBill and MoneyMic, he left his full-time role at Microsoft in 2008 and stepped down from the chairman of the board position in 2014. But he was still on the board of directors until 2019 and claims that about 30% of his time during this period was still spent at Microsoft. Yep. On the board or advising on projects. He had plenty of sway to at least attempt to address the whole child labor thing. Harassment allegations. Plenty. We didn't go into these a ton. He resigned in 2019 from his position on the board at Microsoft, fully leaving the company as harassment allegations against him were being investigated. Also, he's been known to leverage his position to court women, and his advances made plenty of fucking ladies uncomfortable. Egregious behavior after hours? He's in Jeffrey Epstein's little black book.
We want to be careful here because this can devolve into yucky conspiracy theories really quickly.
So fucking quickly, man. It's conspiracy bait.
Here are the facts. He's in Jeffrey Epstein's flight log. We aren't sure what he got up to on that island, but they supposedly got in touch because Bill, because he loves fucking prizes, wanted the Nobel Peace Prize, and he partnered with Jeffrey Epstein after allegations had already been swirling for some time to earn that prize. And that fact, paired with the harassment allegations, were bad enough for Melinda Gates to file for divorce in 2019.
Slap suits and journalist suppression. Holy shit, MoneyMic, we are checking every box.
Dude, this is the first one.
This is the first goddamn one.
Yeah.
He's paid a fortune for media silence. That certainly wasn't all he was buying, but it was definitely a fucking perk. So, verdict.
The verdict is he's a piece of goddamn garbage.
Bill Gates is trash.
As always, thank you so much for listening. We love doing this shit, and people listening to it makes it that much more fun. We check our phones to see how many new listeners we have literally every day. I know that's how I start
It's
my
all
day.
The fucking time. I wake up in the morning and I fucking do it. I love all of you. You're fucking amazing.
Seriously.
MoneyMic and I just fucking talk all the time about you wonderful fucking people listening to our little podcast here. Thank you. If we've gotten anything wrong, let us know. Please, please, please tune in for the next episode. We love you all.